First-person shooters of the 1990s. We're all familiar with these, right? Doom, Quake, Turok, GoldenEye 007, etc. Criterion founder Alex Ward was certainly a fan. During that decade, near the end of it, Iguana Entertainment UK employee Frank Tittle would send copies of PlayStation 1 software to Alex every weekend. But once he was given Medal of Honor, he was instantly hooked, and decided that Criterion needed to make a first-person shooter one day. After presenting Burnout at E3 2001, Alex on his few days off flew to Las Vegas, and his parents encouraged him to go to a shooting range near MGM Grand. Having played video games and watched movies with a lot of guns, it paled in comparison to the real deal, because the second he fired those bullets, it quote, stopped him in his tracks. He was a British game developer in an American shooting range with some of the most dangerous handheld weapons in the world. It was nothing like he had ever experienced before, but there was something about it that clicked, because Alex would continue to visit that shooting range several times over the next 5 years for a video game project known as Project Jupiter. Ward noticed the rise of the North American gaming market, which was dominated by mature titles, mostly shooters, and with this one he wanted to combine the over-the-top action with all the real sound details based on his experiences, become the Burnout of first-person shooters. The question was where to set it. He didn't want another World War II shooter because not only had it already been done a lot even up to that point, Medal of Honor, Battlefield 1942, but the slower weapons didn't fit with the pacing, and nor was he interested in setting it in the Middle East like Desert Storm. The only thing that was on his mind was Russia and its history. He was imagining a Medal of Honor in that country, one that would have the audio finesse and atmosphere of the first two Medal of Honor games but with a Russian setting. Black was released for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox on February 2006, the same year as all three 7th generation consoles, and is also backwards compatible with these two, but we're looking at the PlayStation 2 version. I've never played it before, but going back to the story about when I went to that Xbox 360 pre-release party as a kid, if you saw my Burnout 1 review, I remember this game being advertised along with the 360 version of Burnout Revenge, since both games were by the same developers, and also because that event occurred the same month Black would be released. But it just slipped my mind after that, especially when the Call of Duty series took off and I was hooked to that for a few years. However, Black is the most requested game this month on Patreon, so I can't forget it anymore. CIA Black Ops operative Jack Keller is in an interrogation room and is forced by, actually we don't ever figure out his name, some high-ranked CIA member, to cooperate and explain his side of the 7th Wave, a group of terrorists that Keller's group attempted to eliminate, and threatens to declassify everything he's done, dishonorably discharge him, and send him to prison for the rest of his life if he doesn't.
Very well, Sergeant. Have it your way.
Wait. What do you want me to do?
Tell me everything you know about 7th Wave.
And that's how the whole game presents itself, through Keller's point of view. And I do mean the whole game. 4 days earlier, Keller's team were able to take down a majority of the 7th Wave then and there, except for one, William Lennox, an American who ambushes Keller but doesn't shoot.
And how do you know that?
He spoke to me.
And what did this American say to you?
I can't remember. RPG hit the building, everything's blank after that.
Lennox was a former CIA agent who was presumed dead after the organization failed to defuse a bomb in the middle of Cairo, but continued reappearing on radars around the world every once in a while.
And do you think Lennox is connected to 7th Wave?
Connected? He started the whole thing.
So it's up to Keller to go across the Russian border, take him out and all the 7th Wave's resources, almost single-handedly.
Interesting man. Didn't have anything good to say about you.
You're a liar.
Now you'll notice a problem with this setup right off the bat. The whole thing is set in flashbacks, I can't stress that enough. It's not like you escape from an interrogation room to find out what's really going on like Call of Duty Black Ops. There are no shenanigans from the interrogator himself. None of the partners on your journey have any agendas. There's an explanation as to how Lennox defected to Russia but not why. And there's only one in-game cutscene.
We lost a lot of good people.
Battle school buddies, weren't they?
Yeah.
And the only character development that stood out the most is Keller breaking the rules a bit to reach his target. Why else would he be locked up in an interrogation room with his life on the line despite doing his job?
I know what you're trying to do, sir. It ain't gonna work.
No, Sergeant Keller, you don't know what I'm trying to do.
I was assuming there would be some sort of twist that Keller is lying about the whole thing because of how outlandish the gameplay is, but it's so straightforward and by the numbers, it feels like only 25% of the story is explained. You might as well take away the interrogation part of the game and it would barely make a difference. The original plot was centered on a suitcase bomb, about tracking it down somewhere or needing to escort it through Russia. But while Alex Ward was researching and Criterion were taking their time with the Burnout games, other forms of media were using the same idea, particularly Metal Gear Solid 2's Sons of Liberty, and they made Burnout 2 Point of Impact instead. So what we got instead with Black was the kind of structure and character development of a 1980s action movie. Not much.
It was deemed too dangerous, too politically volatile for a regular strike. So McCarver's crew was tasked. No way anyone in their right mind would volunteer for this.
But when you think about it, that's what they were going for in the first place. Style over substance. More focused on looking exciting, even if it compromises the drama and pacing that war movies do really well. Some games give you two strong themes that conflict with each other to the point of becoming an emotional mess. Grand Theft Auto 4, while a great story nonetheless, is a perfect example of this. Black clearly picked one focus and stuck with it. One that puts gameplay in front, turning it into a video game 80s action film set in a war environment like Rambo. When I was researching the game, the developers talk less about the plot and more about how this game looks and sounds, that the weapons are the main characters. Just look at this game, that's all you need to know. But at the same time, it's unsatisfying knowing where it's set, Russian warfare, dealing with a former CIA agent gone rogue. When you're dealing with mature themes like these, a little more explanation would be handy since this 80s action movie goes longer than an hour and a half, and it would give me a bit more motivation among this chaos.
Top Hat has been negotiated, continuing to broadcast. There's 2-0 until RV, over.
As for Russia itself, the developers were able to present it in a convincing way, from my point of view anyway. It's not like I've ever been to Russia before. It surprised me that Alex never mentioned ever going there either, instead gathering as much source material he could find, including maps, books, notes, TV shows, and movies including Red Heat, Firefox, Gorky Park, and The Hunt for Red October, and the overall result speaks for itself. The aforementioned interrogation cutscenes, snapshots of war, and the soundtrack. Again, it's about style over authenticity without being blatantly inaccurate. The only research I could find where the developers try to be as authentic as possible for a certain area in the game was when the sound team went to Russia for a few days, not just to get a few photos of the country, but to gather real Russian voices instead of impersonators or people of Russian descent. Get the correct accents and military slang. That's crazy considering while you'll be hearing those voices throughout the whole game, it's something I wouldn't have thought about if I didn't know that. Especially because there's no like Russian antagonist, only random enemy soldiers. Because Criterion were transitioning from an arcade racer to a first-person shooter, two completely different genres, in order to meet their graphical goals, what the programmers did was use their already existing code from Burnout and retooled and improved it for Black.
3, this is 2-1, I have eyes on. Stand 2, enemy advancing on your location.
Now I know this came out late in the life cycle of the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, but when you play this game knowing it's over 13 years old as of this video, you have to admire what Criterion accomplished graphically with Black. No wonder the renderware engine lasted so long. For starters, you can run this game in 480p, even on the PlayStation 2. Why is that such a big deal? Because this includes the PAL region as well. For some reason, there aren't that many games here that support that resolution, which is stupid. So this is the best unmodified gameplay footage quality you're going to get from my PlayStation 2. Since the PS3 costed so much for the first couple of years, if you had this game in 2006, you'd be asking yourself, why move on? It has really good human fields of vision given the environment Keller is walking through, not running. There's no sprint button. Like the blur is noticeably specific. If you zoom in on a weapon, a sniper rifle for example, it blurs less. When you reload it blurs the whole screen, and even takes inspiration from Max Payne. Bullets take a few milliseconds to hit their target, target and are scattered on the ground after being fired. If only it didn't copy the idea of short gameplay time, but I'll get to that. And of course, almost every part of a level is destructible, which is Black's party piece. Knowing how detailed the crashes are in the Burnout games, it seemed like a force of habit for the developers to put that same explosive detail into the levels. You can shoot through walls, covers, and blow up vehicles, gas tanks, and any level with a giant bathroom or swarming with minefields looks cool. Even a few bullets can blow everything inside a building, which is weird. But as Chris Healy said, the weapons are essentially the main characters and needed to be treated as such. Sound designer Chris Sweetman was also a huge fan of action films and understood the importance of sound quality, not wanting the guns to sound like a quote pea being shaken in a tin can. He originally wanted the guns to sound as realistic as the ones in the shooting range Alex Ward was at, to create that symphony of pandemonium, but instead focused more on action movie noises that are more familiar to players. And according to artist Tad Swift and designer Chris Healy, the polygon count of the guns is very similar to the cars in Burnout. You can see the reflection from the lighting, and each one has their own individual feature, including the muzzle flash. They're designed to be different from the other, but feel bigger than the player. Just have the control vibration turned on and it's a blast. Unfortunately, this compromises the number of total weapons in the game. I guess Alex wanted to use what was mostly familiar to him when he was at the shooting range, but at least you get all the weapon types you need: pistol, shotgun, assault, submachine, light machine, sniper, grenades, and rockets. I wonder why you always start a level with a different weapon. Keller really likes his guns. Although I don't see the point of a silencer being in stealth mode on certain moments, because even if you kill an enemy without being seen and or being far away, you could be on the other side of the whole level and an enemy will spot you 90% of the time. In fact, I don't even know how to attach silencers, so whenever I get the chance, I just melee attack them instead because that kills them instantly, even the armored ones.
You kidding me? This is my kind of place. All the type of people I like. Quiet and out of the way.
You're in the wrong video game, Macarver. It's like the game is saying, hey, you're in an action movie. Let go. After being so accustomed to first-person shooters of the 7th generation over a decade ago, I needed a bit of adjustment to play Black competently. In fact, I paused it a few times to look at manuals and walkthroughs for the first few levels. I would make comparisons to Medal of Honor, the ones that precede this game and inspired Alex to make Black in the first place, but I haven't played them yet. From my point of view on my first playthrough, it feels like a combination of Call of Duty with a hint of the move and shoot FPSs of the 90s. You can crouch, zoom in, you don't move very fast nor is there a sprint button, and aim sensitivity is low. But because cover spots can be blown off, taking cover all the time isn't the most reliable strategy, so you need to move and shoot instead. While they do attempt to surround you, simply shooting at them kind of slows them down. Cover fire. I'm so used to Max Payne enemies after reviewing those games recently. Here the AI aren't as smart, but boy can they take a lot of punishment. Like the level design, it encourages you to shoot a lot of bullets, not preserve ammo, so by all means put a whole round into one enemy, maybe two just to be sure. I think there was only one instance where I felt like I was low on ammo, which was on the final level. At least headshots and explosions equal instant kills. And when you do swap a weapon, your ammo for the previous one remains if you pick it up again. It's not a very hard game either. First aid kits can be found everywhere on the map, and when you do have one health point left, after a few seconds it gives you another, which is enough to take more than one hit again before death, which is something you'll want to avoid because there are probably 3 checkpoints per level, and they take 30 to 40 minutes to complete each. Not a criticism, just something to point out in a genre where regenerating health is common, and that it doesn't determine how the difficulty works. That would be based on what you need to find and destroy on top of terrorists. The only difficulty options available the first time are easy and normal, and to unlock the rest you need to beat the game, which should be a breeze because it takes less than 5 hours. Along the way, you also need to complete secondary objectives including collecting and destroying enemy-based intel. Why would enemies be clumsy enough to lay all the important stuff just waiting to be destroyed? Because it's video game logic to match the difficulty and themes combined. That's why. Anyway, the higher the difficulty, the more secondary objectives you have to complete. On top of the AI making life harder for you because there are less health packs to pick up, kind of like GoldenEye 007. It doesn't give you any clues to find them, there's no map system, and if you don't complete enough of them at the end of a level, you start all over again. Now I know you can always check how many secondary objectives to complete in the middle of gameplay, but if you're playing this on the hardest difficulty and you get this, that will drive you crazy. Either that or the lack of checkpoints. What drove me crazy, however, actually it did, more like disappointed me, is the fact that it takes less than 5 hours to complete. It's caused by a combination of all the other issues with the game. The lack of character development, variety, what is considered a boss at the end of some levels, including the last one, is just a giant wave of the same enemies, and combined with the sequel bait ending, it felt so anticlimactic. And when you play it a second time, you're doing the exact same thing, and it's the only way to unlock other bonuses like silver weapons and infinite ammo. There's no arcade or survival mode like Max Payne. It comes across as a cheap way to add gameplay time without having to do as much work. Sure, the harder difficulty provides enough serious challenge, the lack of checkpoints will become apparent, but it doesn't feel impossible. I'm not saying it has to be the size of Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2. I just believe gameplay time should be suitable to a full retail price. If you buy it today, you get what you pay for. But in 2006, less than 5 hours isn't enough. It's beggars belief this review as long as it is. I think the reason why is because the majority of the game's memory and power is used up on the graphics and destructible buildings and props. A Grand Theft Auto title, for example, has a giant map with a lot of things to do, but there's no way with the memory of those consoles or even PCs back then, are you going to have the graphics of black combined. That, and this game is from 2006, late in the life cycle of the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, so Criterion wanted to release it while those consoles were still popular before everyone put focus on the next generation. Whatever the reason, I'm just frustrated because I like this game and I wish it continued at least for another couple of hours. What you get overall is something action-packed from the beginning, it does a lot of what was promised in the first minute of gameplay, it takes a bit of adjustment but it controls well enough, and presents itself in a way no other shooter did at the time. However, when you take a step back and think about it, it's a short, simple shooter without much in the way of originality, content, or depth. Something to keep the Criterion developers' minds fresh and not think about arcade races non-stop. If only it got a proper sequel given the room for improvement the way it ended and how much EA love their shooters. It definitely deserved one. Like imagine what Criterion could have done with better hardware. But instead, we got a spiritual successor called Body Count, which I didn't even know about until I researched this game. That sums it all up. Black is a decent single-player only first-person shooter, and play every year or half year to get that quick fix, which is perfect for people who don't have that much time for video games. Fortunately, despite only selling around 1.7 million copies, it's not that hard to do both. Just don't play it again straight away.
This is Bravo 3. Target down. I say again, target is down. Exiting structure.